November of last year, Mayor Adams has continued to stand his ground and defend himself throughout an investigation. Let's look back at some of those moments.
Any inquiry that is done, we're going to fully participate. I have full confidence in her. If she will stay with the campaign team, I would love to have her. I would be shocked if someone states that our campaign coordinated in illegal behavior. We are fully cooperating. We follow the law. So I can become a better mayor by having a global view, because New York City is an international city. And so someone wrote an article and said Eric went to 80 Turkish events. I must have went to 300 African events. We follow all reporting requirements. Brianna, she's no longer doing fundraising.
I think you're going to be indicted.
You guys want to create a narrative, and that narrative is not a reality. First of all, your question was a stupid one, okay? A lot of people were not expecting that. You were expecting it. We're already giving money through the campaign's finance. I don't want to raise money. I don't want to spend hours raising money. These investigations, they raise a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. And the investigations will take care of themselves. And that is not where my time is going to be consumed.
Well, the time is now being consumed because Adams now faces 5 federal charges. Joining me now to break down those charges is a panel of legal experts. Jeremy Saland is a former Manhattan District Attorney, and Jerry Goldfeder is an election law attorney. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. We only have a few minutes, but Jeremy, walk us through criminal procedure. What happens tomorrow when the mayor goes in to be arraigned?
I mean, this is pretty mundane is the appropriate term. It's no different than any other case. Sometimes there's a conversation in advance to figure out whether or not there's going to be any pretrial detention, any type of money that's going to be put, not money, but bail. It's not like the state system where there'd be cash. Fingerprinting, similar. Potentially a mugshot, go before a judge, plead not guilty. Will the passport be surrendered? We don't want you to go to Turkey. We don't want you to go travel out of the country. Well, the magistrate could say, you know, you're going to have to stay in this district, the Southern District of New York. Likely not, because we would expect that the mayor does need to travel to D.C., to Albany, has responsibilities, but to keep an eye on him. So I think it should be fairly quick and fairly straightforward, and then we're going to start to see the discovery as we move this, as the counsel has said, for a quick trial, which theoretically could be in 70 days, theoretically.
A lot of politicians.
The judge has been assigned to this case is Judge Dale Ho, who used to be the voting rights expert at the ACLU. He knows a lot about campaign finance.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you about that. When the mayor says he's disclosed everything, well, the indictment says, no, here's a whole bunch of benefits that you got that you never filed in your conflict of interest board filings. A lot of people call attorneys like you because they get in this kind of trouble. Why is non-disclosure considered a felony, a federal crime?
Well, it's non-disclosure because he was getting favors. That's the allegation. He was being bribed, and he was getting cash and good value that ordinary people don't get. And of course he wasn't going to disclose that because it's illegal. And the straw donor scheme also, of course, was not disclosed because that's illegal. And he knew both of those things were illegal if we are to believe the narrative in the indictment. After all, it's only one side of the story. Right. And everybody is looking forward to hear what he says, what his side of the story is. And there's only 2 people who can change the situation, really, Eric Adams and Kathy Hochul. We don't have recall in the state of New York like they do in California and other cases, other states. So really, it's up to him either to make his case or perhaps be removed.
When we see that as a sitting official, he was getting lots of, over $100,000 worth, according to the indictment, of free travel and luxury hotel stays and so forth. Does he need to do something in return for that to constitute bribery?
Well, from out of the outset, certain people can't donate that money or contribute that money to his campaign. So you can't have Turkish nationals doing that. There's nothing wrong in and of itself from a Turkish national or the nation of Turkey to want to work with the state of New York to find something that works for us both, and the city of New York for the an advantage to both. But it can't be the advantage and the benefit of the individual mayor as a person. That's one of the reasons why he runs afoul. But to your point just moments ago, whether or not he benefited, you can't have straw men to get these 8 times the monies for your campaign, and you can't have that foreign national donating or contributing. So out of the gate, there's the crimes right there.
And it's actually a combination. It's straw men, and also where that money really comes from is from foreigners.
Sure.
So that's two violations, two really critical violations.
Some of it was through corporations. It was like triple dirty money.
Actually, you're right about that.
Yeah,
that's right.
But Jeremy, when you saw Attorney Spiro, the mayor's attorney, making the case in front of Gracie Mansion, evaluate that as a strategy. I'm used to you guys telling your clients, just shut up and let me do the talking, and I'm going to say as little as possible.
Well, I think he's doing a better job than what happened with Trump, where Trump went on this, they're coming after me, because that's really the angle that the mayor has. You know, they're coming after me. It's, you know, he used race, he used retribution, it's lies, it's because I stood up to the Department of Justice or the president. But unfortunately, I think Alex Sparrow went down that road a little bit too much himself. They're tarnishing him. They're making a spectacle of the FBI by showing up when we would have surrendered it. You know what? If there are other emails, which he referenced, then show those emails. And by the way, you've not had weeks or months. You've had a good year or so to show those emails and have those conversations. He's a competent, strong attorney, make no mistake. But this is not about following that showboating, if you will, outside the courtroom, where I thought, frankly, the mayor looked a little glib during that conversation and that communication. Fight it in the courtroom. Show the evidence. Do your job.
Right.
And Jumaane is right. The door is closing. Eric Adams needs to do his counter-narrative to try to demonstrate his innocence as quickly as possible. The voters of New York really demand that. We need stability. We need continuity. And if he's not able to do that, I think the governor is going to act.
But you don't make that narrative any stronger if your defense is they're coming after me because of me.
That's right.
Department. That shows me you don't have a defense. Get in that courtroom, do your job.
Political argument and legal argument not necessarily aligned in this case. Thank you both so much, gentlemen. Very
Always
good to talk with you.
Good to see you as well.
That is going to do it for tonight's show. Keep it right here at New York One for continuing coverage of this historic indictment of Mayor Adams. Thanks so much for watching and have a great evening. And we'll see you next time inside City Hall.